A couple of years ago, I was contacted by an old buddy of mine who told me about a strange encounter his friend had. This friend of his worked the night shift at a power plant in a small town just outside of Austin, Texas. This town is mostly farmland and woods, so it's pretty quiet. Every night at around 3 a.m., his friend had to go check on a transformer located in a fenced area. He had always felt a bit uneasy when he was there, like he was being watched. One night, as he was driving to the transformer, he saw something strange in the light of a street lamp near a house. He backed up his truck and stopped to get a better look. He saw a creature standing on its hind legs with one arm reaching towards the ground. It was about 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with a tail. Its chest area looked less furry. The creature had a head that looked like a wolf or a dog, and it had a scary look on its face. He didn't know what it was, but he felt like it was dangerous. They stared at each other for a while, then he drove off to do his job. The transformer was just around the corner, about 100 yards away. Despite being scared, he still went to the transformer. I couldn't believe it. He said the scariest part was when he had to leave and lock the gate. He had to walk towards his truck, which was left on to light up the area. He had no idea if the creature was waiting for him by his truck. I went to the location a few times at night and sat in my car in a nearby empty parking lot, but I didn't see anything. I haven't heard any more reports about this creature. This is not a made-up story. It's a real encounter that happened in a small town outside of Austin, Texas. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries in this world that we don't fully understand. My brothers and I were out fishing on Lake Tahoe one weekend, specifically on the night of August 14th, 2010. We had gone out at around 8 p.m., hoping to catch some trout for dinner the next day. An hour into our fishing, we came across an oddly mutilated fish floating near the surface of the water. It was a strange sight, and we were a bit unnerved, but we shrugged it off and carried on. Around 9:50 p.m., we decided to call it a night and head back to our cabin. As we neared the shore, we noticed something was off. Our pickup truck, which we had left parked near the dock, was shaking violently. We could see it from the boat, rocking back and forth in the dim light. I grabbed one of the oars, ready to defend myself and my brothers if needed. As we got closer, we saw that the cause of the shaking was a large, beast-like creature. It was pawing at our truck like a bear would paw at a beehive. The creature then stood up on its hind legs, let out a loud growl, and darted off into the woods. We got a good look at the creature before it disappeared. It had long arms and claws that seemed to be about 3 inches long. It had pointed ears, much like a Doberman, and a muscular build. Its snout was elongated, similar to a wolf's, and it had a short, stubby tail. We were shaken up, but we collected ourselves and got back to the cabin safely. We still talk about that night, wondering what that creature was. We've done some research, but we haven't found any animals that match the description. We still go fishing at Lake Tahoe, but we're always a bit more cautious now. So, I was around 13 years old, hanging out in my room late at night, just the usual kid stuff. Listening to music, browsing the internet, chatting with friends online. This was back in the early 2000s, so we're talking about dial-up internet and MSN Messenger. Anyway, I was living in a small town in Michigan at the time, in a house that was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a lot of woods. One night, I remember it was around 2 a.m., I was chatting with a friend who lived a few houses down from me. Out of nowhere, I heard a strange noise coming from outside. It was a kind of rustling sound, like leaves being shuffled around. I felt my heart start to beat a little faster, but I tried to brush it off as being just the wind or something. I had my blinds up because I like to look out at the stars at night, and my desk was right next to the window. So I turned my head to look outside, and what I saw made me literally jump out of my chair. There, in the faint moonlight, I could see something standing near the edge of the woods. It was hard to make out, but it had these glowing yellow eyes and what looked like long ears sticking up, kind of like a dog's. My heart was pounding now, and I quickly dropped to the floor, out of sight from the window. Then I heard it, a high-pitched yelp, followed by the sound of something running off into the woods. I stayed on the floor for a few minutes, just listening. After a while, the only sound I could hear was the usual night sounds, crickets, the wind in the trees, stuff like that. When I finally got the courage to get back up and look outside, whatever it was had disappeared. I quickly shut my blinds and didn't look outside again for the rest of the night. To this day, I still have no idea what it was. Maybe it was a coyote or a wild dog or something. I don't know. But I'll never forget those glowing yellow eyes staring at me from the edge of the woods. A few years back, 5 of us guys decided to venture into the woods near Smithson Creek. The idea was to have a few beers, enjoy the quiet, and just hang out. We're from a small town, and there's not a lot to do around here. We were sober at the time, so the following experience wasn't some alcohol-induced hallucination. The reason we brought guns along was due to an incident that happened a few weeks prior. My younger cousin and her friends were driving down Smithson Road when they saw a man lying in the middle of the road. With nowhere to turn, they tried to reverse, but the guy jumped up and started chasing the car. They managed to escape and came back home terrified, so we decided to carry firearms for protection. It was a bright night, the moon was full and the fog was thick, almost shin-high. The visibility was surprisingly good considering the fog. We scanned the area for any sign of cops and chose a spot near the creek to hang out. The fog and the moon created an eerie glow that added to the ambiance. As we walked further into the woods, we noticed a dark, large object near the tree line, about 100 yards away. We watched it for a few minutes, trying to figure out what it was. A tree stump, a rock, a bush, etc. Finally, we dismissed it as a large bush and continued our trek. After a while, we realized the object was gone. Looking around, we saw something running across the field. It was taller than any dog, its silhouette resembling a wild boar. It was incredibly fast and agile, changing direction effortlessly. It ran towards us, and we quickly raised our guns. It seemed to recognize the guns and started zigzagging. We were scared and decided to retreat. One of my friends tripped and fell into a hole. I ran back to help him up, and we managed to reach the cars. As we drove away, we could see the creature chasing after us. It didn't cross the bridge, however. It seemed like it just wanted to scare us off. Fast forward to 2017, my girlfriend and I were driving on Route 40, just north of Brookville. It was a clear evening, the sun was about to set. Suddenly, she screamed and pointed at something running along the woods. She said it was a huge black creature with a massive upper body, running incredibly fast. She was both excited and terrified. After we got home, she told me more about what she saw. It was a big black thing, much faster than any deer or human, with a huge upper body. She was convinced it was the same creature we had encountered in the woods near Smithson Creek. So, there it is. We still don't know what it was. All we know is that it was something we had never seen before, and it was terrifying. We're just glad we made it out of there. I wanted to share with you an experience that has recently occurred in my family's life. Last month, my brother Dylan was visiting our family farm in Comanche County, Oklahoma. His son, Liam, accompanied him on this trip. Our uncle, Cooper, owns the property and has been telling us about some strange happenings lately. Cooper has reported hearing odd, unidentifiable noises coming from the surrounding woodland. He's even gone so far as to shoot into the woods a few times, trying to scare off whatever creature or creatures might be lurking there. Dylan's son, Liam, also reported seeing a tall, strange creature moving towards Cooper's house from the woods. They've also seen unexplained shadows around the family burial plot. I'm hoping to get the green light from them to dig a little deeper into these occurrences. Liam, who loves hunting, reports hearing footsteps, knocks, grunts, and growls when he's out deer hunting on the property. A couple of years ago, our aunt's livestock on her portion of the property was frightened by something. One of the animals, a llama, was found dead and brutally torn apart. Everyone said it was most likely a bear, but from the details I've been given, I'm not so sure. Just a few days ago, my mother was driving to work in the early morning hours, around 5 a.m. She noticed a red glow from the corner of her eye, reflecting off her headlights. She tried to identify what was causing it, but the sight of the creature left her feeling uneasy. The creature was approximately the same height as my father, around 6 feet tall, and appeared to be moving towards a nearby cornfield. As she drove past, she described seeing what looked like a naked man covered in dark, wolf-like fur, but without a tail. After passing it, she observed the creature turning its head to watch her vehicle, but its body remained stationary. She mentioned feeling a deep sense of malevolence from the creature, as well as a chilling intelligence. A few months before this incident, I was driving home from work late at night, around 11:30 p.m. I too saw a red glow in the distance, and then saw a large creature dart across the road about a mile ahead of me. The creature had black fur, a long snout, a large head, and strangely angled muscular legs. It had no tail. It reminded me of a cross between a wolf and a wild boar. At the time, I had no idea what it could be, but after doing some research, I believe it was a Dogman, a creature of local legend. Just last week, another sighting was reported near Lawton in Comanche County, Oklahoma, about 100 miles from our farm. I'll keep you updated on any further developments. Please keep this information to yourself for now. I don't want to cause unnecessary alarm. I thought I'd reach out to share a rather unsettling experience that occurred not too long ago. This happened in our home state of Texas, specifically near the town of Seguin. A close friend of mine, who I've known since childhood, related this incident to me. He had been driving on the outskirts of town on a remote stretch of road that runs parallel to the Guadalupe River. It was late in the evening. His truck's headlights and the faint glow of his brake lights were the only sources of illumination in the enveloping darkness. As he was driving, he heard a strange sound, almost like a cry or a scream. At first, he thought it was just his truck making weird noises. But when he stopped to investigate, he noticed something peculiar in his rearview mirror. He told me he saw what looked like two eyes reflecting light, similar to the way a raccoon or a bobcat's eyes would gleam in the pitch black of the night. But then, those eyes rose, reaching a height of about 5 or 6 feet. He said he saw a figure, humanoid in form, start to approach his truck. The figure, according to my friend, was hairless with pointed ears and a snout resembling a dog. It had a thin body, with gray skin that seemed to stretch tightly over its skeletal frame. My friend was in shock. He said it looked like a real-life werewolf, albeit without any fur. Needless to say, he didn't stick around to investigate further and sped off as fast as his truck would allow. I understand how troubling this could be for anyone to hear, especially since it happened close to where we grew up. I've also sent an email to the local authorities about this incident. Shifting gears a bit, let me share another unsettling incident that happened to me personally. This was back in the summer of '92. My family and I had decided to visit the Galaxy Drive-In Theater, located in Ennis, Texas. It was a warm summer night, and we had just enjoyed a meal from Whataburger, a local favorite. After enjoying the movie and the meal, my dad thought it would be fun to take a detour through the more remote parts of the town. We found ourselves on a desolate road, and all of a sudden, it became eerily quiet. There were no other cars on the road, and we were all enveloped in an unsettling silence. My dad suddenly stopped the car, his voice filled with surprise and a hint of fear. In the glow of our car's headlights, we saw a tall, gray figure with pointed ears and a snout-like muzzle. It had yellow, piercing eyes that seemed to glow ominously. I remember feeling a sense of dread wash over me, a feeling of being completely powerless. The figure crossed the road in just 3 strides and disappeared into the woods on the other side. The entire encounter lasted only a few seconds, but the memory of it is etched into my mind. It was a truly terrifying experience, and to this day, I avoid going into the woods or camping. I hope sharing these experiences might help in some way. It's not easy to relive these memories, but perhaps getting it out there might bring some form of closure. Thanks for taking the time to read this. I wanted to share some experiences I've had here in the plains of Central Texas, in a small town named Brady, located within McCulloch County. I've had several encounters with a creature that resembles a wild wolf. The first encounter occurred on a cold winter's day, February 12, 2017, around 10:28 p.m. I was hauling hay in our field as the snow was falling heavily. Our farm is surrounded by woods, and this occurrence took place in the woods to the east. As I was about halfway through the field, I suddenly heard a rustling movement in the nearby creek. I initially guessed it was an armadillo or a rabbit that I had startled. I halted my work to observe the direction of the noise. Suddenly, an enormous creature emerged from the brush and darted north with remarkable speed. Its rapid passage was marked by the snapping of large branches in its path. I was rooted to the spot, in shock and amazement, unable to comprehend what had just transpired. My second sighting happened on June 6, 2017, around 1:42 p.m. The first encounter had left me quite unnerved, and this was my first venture back into the woods. I was inspecting our land, a stretch of about 45 acres primarily consisting of oak trees and a creek running through it. I was making my way across the creek, heading west, when I noticed something large and dark to the north. At first glance, I mistook it for a wild boar. It was furiously digging at the southern bank of the creek. However, when it straightened, coming up to an intimidating height of approximately 8 feet, I was panic-stricken. It tilted its snout upwards, sniffing the air a few times before its gaze darted to the west and then back to me. With sudden, swift movements, it disappeared into the surrounding bushes, proceeding to leap from tree branch to tree branch. Unlike the first sighting, this creature had pitch-black fur, which was oddly tangled and smelly, resembling rotting vegetation mixed with spoiled fruit. The third and the most recent encounter took place on December 3, 2019, this time around 11:20 p.m. I was inside my house when the dogs started acting strangely. They wouldn't stop barking at the back door, so I decided to take a look to see what was making them so anxious. When I opened the door, an unnerving cold rushed inside, immediately giving me a sense of unease. I stepped onto the back porch, straining to hear anything apart from the howling wind. There was nothing at first, until a loud cry echoed from the woods that border our property. It sounded like a wolf's howl, though bear in mind that there are no wolves in Central Texas that I'm aware of. Still, The primal part of me recognized that sound as something predatory, something dangerous. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the darkness, and there, at the edge of the tree line, were a pair of eerie yellow eyes staring back at me. Many times, I have questioned what I saw, but the piercing eyes shining in the darkness were unmistakably real and petrifying. They glowed with an intensity that seemed almost artificial, like LED lights. The creature stood there, a silhouette visible only because of the lights from the porch. It looked enormous, even from a distance, resembling a massive wolf. Its front legs seemed more muscular than the back, making its posture appear somewhat hunched. It had a snout that was long and narrow with what appeared to be an imposing set of jaws. Terrified, I stepped back, and in that instant, the eyes disappeared, leaving me staring into the pitch-black night. The following morning, I ventured out to where I had spotted the creature. I found tracks, larger than that of a coyote or even a large dog. It wasn't proof, but it made me feel less insane to know that something tangible was there. There was a fourth encounter on May 10th, 2020. But that's a story for another time, as I'm sure this email has run quite long. Anyway, thank you for listening. It helps to know I can share these experiences without immediate ridicule. I continue my life out here in rural Texas, always aware of the mysterious creature lurking in the shadows, reminding me of the untamed nature that exists just beyond our back door. My name has to remain anonymous, owing to the nature of my profession and the rules it comes with, within the confines of a military base. I serve in the U.S. Army, working at the Fort Hood base in Killeen, Texas. My story dates back to April of 2003, an event that happened around 5 in the morning. I am part of the military police, and I primarily worked the early morning shifts. Our base, located towards the northeast of Killeen, bordered vast stretches of desert and Texas scrubland. During early morning shifts, between the hours of midnight to 8 a.m., we usually had a reduced workforce. Generally, 7 to 8 of us were assigned to each shift. One particular morning, I was on my routine rounds in the patrol car, a standard Ford Crown Victoria, ensuring all was secure around the base perimeter. The morning air was typically cold and crisp, and the eerie silence was broken only by the lone hoot from a distant owl. I was driving towards the east side of the base when suddenly, my headlights caught a pair of eyes gleaming back at me in the distance. They were almost at the same level as my own, and quite reflective, which was odd given that I was inside a patrol car. During those days, many of us had spotted a massive wild boar lurking around the base. Reports mentioned about a creature with a size of about 300 pounds or more. When I initially spotted the reflecting eyes about 70 yards away, I made the assumption it might be the massive boar that had decided to venture out again. Now's my chance to see this behemoth up close, I thought, and pressed my foot down on the accelerator, speeding towards it. What happened next unfolded within a matter of moments. As I was closing in, I instinctively flicked the switch for the floodlights mounted atop the car, providing a broader spectrum of illumination. The reflective eyes stared back at me, steady and unwavering, as a bipedal creature came into view. This wasn't the boar we had been warned about. The creature, standing about 70 feet away, was gigantic, appearing man-like but with a distinct canine-like head, resembling that of a husky or an Alaskan Malamute. Its ears were pointed, and its eyes shone an otherworldly amber. Its head sat atop deeply muscled shoulders without any visible neck, and its forward-leaning posture was unnatural, looming heavily towards the front, almost at 60 degrees. The chest area of the body was embedded deep into its frame, much like canines, and its muscular thighs were crafted like those of a professional athlete, angled forwards from the torso, leading towards small knee joints. The rest of the legs imitated a canine's, angling backwards towards the hocks. It seemed as if the creature could use these to spring forward or even leap in the air, a sight that would truly be terrifying in the dim morning light. The eeriness was, however, not over. The creature, after acknowledging me for a few heart-stopping seconds, turned and simply walked towards the scrublands by the base. Its height was significant, if not alarming. As it walked away, its head was still visible over the shrubbery and prickly pears, which were about 6 feet in height at most places. Every second of this encounter was burnt into my memory as if with a hot iron. After it moved out of sight, I sat there for what felt like a long time, staring into the darkness towards the direction it had gone. I had notions to give chase, but the sheer enormity of what I had just seen paralyzed my senses. Eventually, I got my act together and called in to report, describing what I had just encountered. There was a moment of silence on the other side before a burst of chuckles. Clearly, they thought this was a prank. However, they wouldn't have laughed had they seen what I had. I wanted to go inspect the spot where the creature had been. There wasn't a specific protocol for a situation like this, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be a simple task. Therefore, I requested backup to gain some form of credibility along with my account of the situation while also ensuring personal safety. The reinforcements arrived, 2 of them, Seaman Riley and Officer Nelson. The lamp from the watchtower peered towards the direction of our exploration. It was the only source of light that we commanded at the moment. Riley led the way with a powerful torchlight. I followed suit with a handheld one, while Nelson brought up the rear with a flickering flashlight. The ground was ripped apart, more thrashed than scratched, with claw marks size of my index finger dug deep into the sand. A stale smell ravaged the area, bitingly metallic. A probable bear or wild boar encounter wouldn't have left such an alarming sign. Later the next day, carefully skipping the eventful wee-hour disaster of the encounter, I asked my fellow officers for any information about similar sightings or encounters. The local wildlife authorities were also contacted with detailed descriptions of the event. Oddly enough, this was the only encounter of such kind in the base. There were, however, a string of subsequent reports about missing pets from the nearby Pendleton Park area in the following weeks. It was a peaceful neighborhood, but had a significant amount of pet owners. I wondered if there was a connection. The sightings of the creature struck me as bizarre and out of place within our local ecosystem. As a military police officer of the Fort Hood base, I have often roamed into the very early hours of the day, driving around the base perimeter under moonlit skies, vigilant to any shifts in the calm. Naturally, events like this truly get under the skin of even the bravest. However, the strangest part came afterwards. The footprints. During our midnight investigation, we had followed a faint trail leading away from the border of the base. There were large footprints visible in the soft sand and mud around the base which clearly did not belong to your average wildlife. The prints were large and muscular, measuring a good 13 inches in length and 7 inches in width. The footprints had a distinct imprint of 4 toes ending with sharp claws, a firm heel, and a 5th dexterous toe positioned somewhat like a thumb but on the side. The stride was also greater than of any known land species found in this geographical area. We took casts of the footprints, part of my attempt to find a logic to the encounter and make sense of the bizarre situation. They sat in my desk for many weeks, as I deliberated whether to share my story beyond the confines of the base, or even consulting with a zoologist friend of mine, even though I was constantly reminded that we were forbidden to disclose internal base affairs with civilians or press. However, discretion began to feel like a heavy shroud, questioning my acceptance of such abnormality within the peaceful Texas environment. It came to a point where I knew I had to do something. Investigating further seemed the only rational next step to me. My predicament continued for the following weeks, punctuated only by occasional odd sighting reports from the nearby communities and park area. People reported strange howling sounds, like a deep, distressed baying of a wolf, echoing off the Killeen landscape, expanding into the Texas night. A handful of witnesses even claimed to have seen a large, bipedal animal springing away into the darkness. Each report reignited the haunting memory of my own encounter. The following weeks were an uphill battle to retain my sanity, while also investigating my unforgettable pre-dawn encounter. It was hard to shake off even with the demands of my work as a military police officer. Despite everything, the one thought that stood out at the end of each day was simply, what was that creature? In this narrative, I sincerely hope that you appreciate the intensity and peculiarity of my encounter that cold April morning back in 2003. The stories are meant to be shared and warnings traced from them. Not all were meant to bump headlong into mysteries or face the unknown. Yet if you perchance find yourself in a similar situation, remember my story.